find the difference by hand, then use a calculator to check your work. So let's see what we can do with this problem. We're still being asked to subtract, so we're going to be using that same idea of, instead of subtracting, we're going to add the opposite. So this first problem, we have negative 6.6. Instead of subtracting, we're going to change the subtraction to addition. So subtraction is going to become addition. We're going to add the opposite of what was being added. 5.4 was being added, so the opposite of that is negative 5.4. Okay. Now, to add these two numbers, we just have to keep track of a couple of things. We have to see that there's decimal points, so we need to be sure that we keep our decimal points lined up. We also want to keep track of the fact of our signs are showing us that both of these are negative. And so remember, when we add two signs that have the same sign, two numbers that have the same sign, we're going to add the numbers and keep the sign. Okay, so same sign, take the sum, keep the sign. So 6.6, remember that was negative? To that we're going to add negative 5.4. And when we add that up, 6 and 4 is 10, so 0, carry my 1. 6 and 5 is 11, plus 1 more is 12. I'm keeping things lined up here, bringing my decimal points straight on down. And because both of those were negative, remember my final answer is going to be negative 12. So I can write it as negative 12.0, or it's also okay just to write it as negative 12. We don't need to write the 0.0 part. On our second problem, negative 8.1 minus negative 10.3. So negative 8.1, so instead of thinking subtract, we're going to think add the opposite. The opposite of negative 10.3 is just plain old 10.3, positive 10.3. So now if I'm going to add these two numbers, because their signs are different, this is a negative 8.1, this is a positive 10.3. Since their signs are different, we need to take their difference. So to take the difference, we're going to put the larger number on top. When we're doing subtraction, we always want to put the larger number on top, if we have to do it by hand. And we're going to subtract the 8.1. So subtract 8.1. Be sure to keep things lined up, especially your decimal points. And when we do our subtraction, 3 minus 1 is 2. 10 minus 8 is 2. And again, being sure we don't lose our decimal point. And then if we think about what should be the sign of our final answer, which we always want to keep track of, what's our sign? Be sure you're always asking yourself that question. My original problem up here, I had negative 8.1 plus positive 10.3. 10.3 was the larger of the two, and it was positive, so my final answer is going to be positive 2.2, or I can just write it as 2.2. So to check our work on the calculator, let's bring the calculator into play here. And if we check the first one, we want to just keep track of the subtraction sign over here versus the negative sign down here. So negative 6.6 minus, now we use subtraction, 5.4. And notice we're using the original problem that we were given, not the one that we changed it to. This will help us to make sure that we did all of our changes correctly. So always go back to the original problem. If we do that subtraction, we end up with negative 12. Yep, and that checks just like we thought it should. In our next problem, let's clear this out. We had negative 8.1. And from that, we're going to subtract negative 10.3. And again, you can choose to use the parentheses here if you want to around the negative 10.3, or your calculator will be able to keep track of that even if we don't use those. So let's this time try not to use those. Negative 10.3. And we just want to make sure that we've entered everything in correctly. When we go to press the enter, we have 2.2, and that's exactly what we ended up with for our final answer when we worked it out by hand.